The first person to wake up was my husband, and he heard the shelling. He started waking me up and telling me to get up because something was coming.
My classmate called me at 4 a.m. and said that you were sleeping, the war had started.
Man died on the 5th and 10th day of the war. At 5 a.m., his head of the border guard service called and simply said that the Volg was gone. The end of the briefing. I am from Luhansk region, from the village of Troitsky. We lived about 15 kilometers from the border with Russia. Like a normal family, they are very happy. I raised 2 children with my husband. A man was a military man, 18 years old. The border guard service of Ukraine, always on the border. On the 24th, my husband had to report for duty for 24 hours. He didn't show up for his 24 hours. He got the call from the service at 5 a.m. I want everyone to come and gather. We didn't realize that. He got up and asked me what to wear. I just said, put on whatever is warm. It's better to take off your clothes. He got dressed. And that was the last time we saw each other. We said goodbye on the doorstep of our house. We left. The children were still sleeping. And perhaps an hour later, the first explosion occurred. That I had already heard. He called and told me to turn on the TV. The war started. The man died on the 5th and 10th day of the war. At 5 a.m., his head of the border guard service called and just said that Vova was gone. You know, we are already in our 3rd year, but I still don't want to believe it. I still want to wait for something. It was hard because my children and I were under occupation. As a military family, we were not allowed to leave. They let us leave the village. I could not bury my husband. I could not get to his grave. He's buried in Dnipro. They buried him without us. It was only after 4 months that I was able to visit his grave in Dnipro. When the war started, my daughter was 3 years old, and my son was 8 years old. Well, they also celebrated their first birthdays in the occupation. The youngest was 4 years old. The husband was 40 days old on the same day. She didn't know her father was gone for 6 months. I couldn't tell her about it. I dreamed to everyone that I would get out of the occupation. I will find child psychologists, and that one of them would help me about it and convey to the child that that's it. My goal was to go to the cemetery to see my husband, and then it somehow comes together. And so it happened, I left. I moved to my husband's place. When I arrived, there were already 3 fields of our heroes in Dnipro. And there is a Ukrainian flag near each grave. And it's Russell, when you close your eyes, I dreamed about it for a long time. Because those were the first emotions. No one showed me. My husband's brother, he guarded it himself. And he said, when you get to the cemetery, he said, call me and I'll show you. But I didn't call. I don't know, I didn't feel like I was going. I just ran to where he was buried. And I found it myself. My son, yes, he knew it was a cemetery. My daughter has never been to a burial. I didn't see any graves. I didn't see anything, but she was very happy. I ran around saying that there were Ukrainian flags. She said, Mom, we are in Ukraine, we are in Ukraine. And that's it. But when we approached the grave, Of course, there were no photographs there. There is only a sign and a daughter. For some reason, she said it herself. She did not know that her father was gone. She said it was my dad in the house. Dad is here. We will never be the same as we were in the past. It's not coming back. Unfortunately, we have become much stronger at this price. Because every woman I meet who lost her husband, she is incredibly strong. It's incredibly hardy, because for every woman, I had a lot of challenges.
There was no water, no electricity, no gas. There was nothing. We cooked on the streets. That is, they were made of bricks. We cooked, let's say, under fire. The airplanes were flying. I had to cook because the children had to be fed. We had neighbors downstairs, family. Dad, mom, a boy, their son. He must have been 13 years old at the time. Their daughter is also young. 4 of them were probably not there. They also went for water. I had to walk for kilometers to get water. The father and son left, and we got there just in time for the arrival. And so nothing was buried. It was very scary that people were being killed. They were not removed from the roads. That is, there was no one to clean it up. So you were driving, you saw the road strewn with corpses.
Yes.
Захоронение, people were buried in trenches. That is, they dug a trench and everyone put the corpses there. It's like a mass grave. We were just leaving that day when the drama theater was shelled. First of all, it was a large room. They made field kitchens there. Many children were there with their mothers. And there was a sign saying that there were children there in bigger letters. And yet, perhaps it is. People thought they would not start shelling. The connection is in the very neighborhood where we were. Disappeared on March 4. There was no longer any connection. And by March 16, we were completely well cut off. We tried to catch radio signals. There was only Russian radio. There was no Ukrainian. And on Russian radio, they were saying that Kyiv was captured. Yes. Well, many people thought it was true. But we left. Some acquaintances who lived nearby also came to us. Well, they lived in a private house nearby. And they said there was a connection breaking through in one place. And I called my brother, my own brother. He lives in Kyiv. And then he said that Larissa had to leave because there wouldn't be another chance to leave. And that was the last moment when we packed up and left. And we just drove out onto the road. I was already heading to Berdyansk. There were a lot of cars leaving at that time. There was no green corridor. We constantly, until March 16, heard that there was a green corridor somewhere, but it wasn't there because the shelling was constant. Have you seen Russian tanks?
Yes.
As we're leaving Mariupol for Zaporizhia, there were a lot of Russian checkpoints from Berdyansk to Vasilivka. Everything was already occupied by Russians because we were leaving with our children. My youngest wasn't even 2 years old yet. The eldest was 7 at the time. They didn't hold us for long. They led us through somehow. But what we saw, the cars ahead of us that were leaving without children, they turned everything out of the car. That is, all the things, all the bags. Everything was checked. Phones were taken away. They took everything. Those who were leaving Mariupol, everything was taken from them.
Did your children have any fears? How did you explain to them when they saw the destroyed?
Burning buildings, the noises.
When we arrived in Kyiv,
My youngest, for a long time, heard the sounds of shelling. It was probably harder for the older one because he understood more. When there was shelling in Kyiv too, we went down to the metro and he said these words. He started crying and said, "Mom, it will be the same here as in Mariupol."